Yeah, Gilbert is here, so I'm going to add him up right now. Gilbert Bassey.
Hey,
Okay, I think outside is quite better.
yeah. So it's like video feedback. Is it good for everyone?
Yeah, let's just carry on. But if there's any if you can't hear us clearly or you can't see the video, you could just send drop a comment in the comment box. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So I was saying plot. So basically, we need to plot because stories about getting is like we're trying to manipulate emotions. Basically, when you narrow everything down, what we're trying to do with the story is to manipulate the audience's emotions, to generate whatever emotion, whether it's sadness, it's joy, whatever it is. And if you're manipulating for anything, which means you have to be intentional, as in, this thing has to come before this other thing. So that's really what plotting is. How do you arrange things in a way that you are maximizing the impact of the story? Because the truth is, the story, in a sense, is kind of different from the plot. As in, you have a story, but it can also not be well plotted. So you have a good story, but it hasn't
Yeah.
been well plotted. So I think that's why we plot. Now, the principles of plotting. Basically, what these principles are is like whenever you're working on your story, right? These principles are kind of like, your plot is working, or how to, it's like anything now anybody's going to tell you about plot is the why do you do it, why do you, or is if someone says you have to plot, you have to do 3 acts, or by the third act something has to happen, why? You get that? So that's what the principles basically cover. Now the first principle is, I call it the GA principle. So it's basically goal and antagonism. No story, like you can't tell a story if you don't have a goal. First things first. So we have a story with many characters, and in these characters, our protagonist doesn't want anything. Nobody wants anything. Everyone is just living their life normal. There's nothing to, like, what are you going to plot? What are you plotting to? Do you get? Because the whole concept of plot is we're trying to get to the end. And so
Yeah.
really we kind of know before you say you are plotting, you know where the end is. Because remember that it's about maximizing impact, like the impact of the story for,
Mhm.
And so the first thing you need, and so the principle of goal and antagonism states that no story can be told without a goal and the antagonism that stands in its way. And think about it. So a man, so we start the story with a man, and the man is just walking on the road, and we don't know what the man wants. But then, if we keep just watching the man walk, we'll be bored. But if we knew, right, that this man was looking for something before he started walking, we're more interested in why is he going to get this. If your story is not working, the goal is the goal. Start from the goal. Like, if the story is flat, what is the goal? Is there a goal? Is there a character like moving? And if there is a goal, so goal is one thing. Then the next thing is the antagonism. Because when you want something, life has never given you what you wanted. Never. It's not like, oh, I want this thing now, and then I get it. No, there's always one obstacle or the other. And really, that's what all the story is. A character wants something, he goes to get it, and many things stop him on the way. That's all the story is. So without a lot of antagonism, the story will be flat. So this what's his name? I don't think he's still here. He asked a question about making.
Yeah, he hasn't rejoined. I think we should wait until he joins again before we answer that question.
Okay, so before I talk about that, anyways, for those just joining, basically what we're talking about are the principles of antagonism. And the first principle is principles of
Of
plotting.
course.
And so the first principle is goal and antagonism. Basically, you can't tell your story without a goal and then the antagonism. It's like storytelling 101. Now, the second principle, if you missed anything, right, you can just ask a question and then I'll answer. Now, the second principle is the principle of cause and effect. And now, what that states is a story is only as coherent and engaging as the sequence of cause and effect is clear. Now, that one is English. What that means in like practical terms is, so remember that I said when you are plotting, you need to know what the end is, right? So how are we going to get from the beginning? If you know the beginning, you know the end. How are we going to get from the beginning to the end in a way that is very entertaining and, you know, does the story justice, right? The only thing you can use is cause and effect. Because when you think about like, this happens because this happens, because this happens, you know, and then it's like a chain reaction. And so if you notice, like there are some films you watch, or maybe sometimes you start a story and then you're like, it's dry, until after a while it kicks into gear. Most times it's because the cause and effect, you know, the sequence where this character has gone here and done something, and that has led to something that's happened in this other scene, and then was, you know, following that thing. There are some films that do it masterfully. All them like Marvel films, they know how to do it. Where it's like the thing you watched before leads into the next thing, and it's easy for the audience to follow the story, because then it's like we're going on a straight line. But the moment, you know, you show us something here, then you go show us something there, then you go show us. There are some, you know, storytellers that do it. It's intentional sometimes, but then later they would like connect everything together. But some people just show different things and there is no sense of connection to them. It's like, how does this influence this?
Yeah.
So principle of cause and effect is like key. Even the way you make sense of the world, right? How you see things. Something happened because of something. Like when they ask you, what happened? You say, why? First question is why? Because of course something had to happen. Yeah. Now the third principle is, I call it the principle of save the best for last, right? So basically what we're saying is the reason why we are plotting, the goal of our plotting is so that we can get maximum emotional impact dependent on the story. So if you're Christopher Nolan, maybe it's that thrill, you want that sense of thrill to be mad by the third act. Fine, that's the emotion that you're going for. If it's a horror film, you want like the fear to be crazy by the time we get to the, you know, it should just be, the principle is just, when we are experiencing something, the best should come at the end. Do you get? It's just how life is. Because why? So there is like a scientific experiment to prove that the ending matters more to people than every other thing that came before. Look at Game of Thrones for a perfect example. No matter how good the first 4 seasons were, or first 7 seasons, just because of one season, one really nyashy season, right? In fact, it's so bad that even one episode can destroy like a 200 episode whatever, because why? The ending matters a great deal. And most people, because remember that, you know, people that subscribe to Stephen King's thinking, where, you know, plot is, we don't touch plots, you know, let it flow, let the story flow, let the characters flow. Fine. But when the characters are flowing, you are not plotting, so you're not doing anything for maximum impact. So maybe, you know, the character has done something and then the best thing happened in the middle of the film or the story. And then we are waiting at the end and it's like, you know, you've enjoyed the best part of it. And so you're left, the last emotional note that film left in your, or that story left in your consciousness was, it was okay. And that's the feeling you carry out of the, if it's cinema, that's the feeling you carry out of the cinema. If it's a book, that's the feeling you carry out, right? So anyways, the last principle in terms of like plotting, the principle of change, which means, so we know that we're plotting for maximum emotional impact, we're plotting for, we're plotting with cause and effect. But yeah, so change basically is, the last principle change is the presence of change within a story greatly increases its level of impact and insight, right? What that means is the only reason why we are here to tell the story is so that we can show change on some level. either in a character or like, remember, story starts, character wants something. Either he gets it or he doesn't get it, right? If he gets it, it's still changed because he didn't have it before. But like, it goes deeper than that, in the sense of, before someone gets something, most times people are like their own worst enemies. If you notice, like many screenwriting, whatever, always tell you, you know, give the protagonist a flaw, give them something that is keeping them from what they need to get, so that
Yeah.
if you give them that flaw, the change would now be they will overcome that flaw. By overcoming that flaw, you've become a different person. Do you get? So it's like, if you were selfish when the story started, and by the end you are no longer selfish, you've changed, right? And so when plot and story is in service of change, the impact is much greater than if the story starts. That's the principle. So basically, the first principle is the principle of goal and antagonism. Once you give a character a goal and you put obstacles in his way, you've started telling a story. Without a goal and antagonism, there is no story. You will just be stressing yourself out, right? Second principle is the principle of save the best for last, right? And
Yeah.
that basically says the end is where everything is at. Without the end, it won't work. Now, the third principle, I mean, I've taken it out of order, but the third principle is the principle of cause and effect, which means how you get from the beginning to the end is, something happened to this character, then he went and did this thing, then this thing happened. Do you get? This is where plot, because most times, you know how like things just happen and then you want the character to do something, then you create an event, right? A new scene that has no relationship to other scenes and nothing else. It won't work. So every time you need the character to move, you create a new scene. It won't work. Instead, you just need characters. Each person has their reason for acting. So it's that chain of cause and effect. Because this thing happened here, it has come, do you get? And so when people experience things like that, the effect is much stronger, right? And then the last principle is the principle of change. Everything is so that something can change, mostly in a character, because that's where we get the insight of the story, right? Doesn't mean you can't make a story where the character like doesn't stay the same. If it stays the same and a lot of things have happened to him, right? He's still changed in the sense that, do you know how like you've been wicked, and then maybe there's a desire for you to be good, but you are not good. And so even after all the chances that the story presents to you, you stay like evil. Your evil has changed. Now your evil don't enter another level of evil. So even though you stayed the same, you changed. And that's really it. That's the principles of helps you.
Plotting.
Yeah, we're plotting.
Okay, you know, like it's just so sad that the other guy didn't join, the guy that asked the first question.
Yeah.
So I just feel like maybe we should just touch on it. And if anyone else has a question, they could just drop it in the comment, please. The question should be based on plotting, on writing, you know, content creation. Just drop it and Gilbert will handle it. Thank
The
you.
one wasabi. But I think what he asked before was, how do I make my story interesting? So it's like, I know the beginning from the end, right? But how do I make it more interesting? And you know, I'd say how do you make it more interesting? You can't know the beginning. Like it's conflict. How much like fight are they fighting inside? And when I mean fight, it's not physical fight. It's somebody wants something. How easy is it for him to get it, right? And the people that are standing in its way, how emotional are the scenes? Because maybe it's not working because you are reading it and you are not feeling anything. And if you are not feeling anything, then maybe you've been lying somewhere. Like you're not true to the characters, or maybe the conflicts that you've presented is not compelling enough. Because the truth is, not all stories are that interesting. And so maybe the problem is with the story itself. It's not. So when you ask, how do I make this? It's not interesting. Then maybe you need to rework the story. But I can't give one answer as to how can I make my story more interesting. You'd have to understand how plot, character, and theme and everything comes together. Yeah. I don't think anyone has any question.
I think I do.
Narrate, you just joined us. Sorry, class, it don't end.
I think I have a question. You said something about, I don't know if maybe I got you wrong, but you said something about stories flowing. You gave reference to Marvel, where you were like, stories should flow seemingly. So one scene should lead into another scene. So let's say I want to use flashback in my story. Lots of flashbacks. What could be a key to making it like, even though it's a flashback, what can make it flow? Like, even though I'm going back and forth, what would you say is the factor that ties in the whole story to make it fluid, to make the reader to understand what I'm trying to,
The principle, so it's back to the principle of cause and effect.
Okay.
One thing happens because of, so if you are going to go into a flashback, right? The easiest way is find a motivation within the scene. If you don't have a motivation, like a story motivation, you can use, so it's like maybe you end visually, right? In like normal, if it's film, you end on a lamp and then match cut that lamp to something in the past, right? Of course, that would work if whatever you are going to show in the scene, right, connects to something that we've already seen in this scene. So most times flashback get a bad rep because they, you just go to explain something. Rarely should you just go to explain something. It should, if you're explaining, it should be that so that we can better understand why this person is now going this way. It's like, so someone says she wants to kill somebody. And, the film has started since that person has been trying to kill that person. And then at some point, you find a good reason to go back and show us why is she trying to kill the person. Do you get? So it's really about cause and effect. Joby, you said predictability. I don't get what you mean by predictability. In what sense? Like making a story predictable or making a story less predictable? Like can you just expand a bit on the question? While I wait for Joby to retype his, to make your story less predictable.
How to, I think that's, the keyword is adding a lot of suspense, I believe. So how to make your story more suspenseful.
Yeah, where it's like, you don't know what is coming. It's like you can't guess. So predictability, I think it really it rests more on, so it's like when you say something is predictable, is that we've seen it before and we know how it goes, right? And so that's mostly like it's kind of the same thing with cliche. Like something is predictable is also the easiest way to avoid that, right? The easiest way to avoid that is by first knowing that it is predictable. Like what you have come up with is predictable. And so now that you know it's predictable, how do I avoid the predictable? Right? I don't know if you get what I mean. So it's like being one step ahead. So there was one time I was working on a story. And so we said at the end, this happens. But then we knew, like the moment we said it, we knew, we've seen films where this happened. Right? And so we're like, okay, how can we take it one step further? Like something that hasn't happened before. So it's really, I don't think there is any, it's just the awareness that you don't want to create something that is cliche. And so whenever you see something that is cliche, you have to be honest with yourself that I've seen this thing before. And so I have to change it. Like I have to figure it out. Yeah. I don't know. Does that answer the question? Does that help?
I think so. Well, let's hear from she hasn't said anything.
Joby, are you all right with that? Okay.
Okay, I think we could just round up then. If no questions. Okay, Shaz.
Yeah, I think. All right, then. Thank you guys for joining us, and thank you for having me. I've passed the baton back to you, Fanny.
All right, thanks, Gilbert. That was interesting. So, in case you have any more questions about writing and all that, Gilbert's handle is tagged to the most recent post on our page, so you can always follow him and just drop some questions in his DM or in his comments or anything. All right, Gilbert, thanks so much for honoring our invitation to join us in the conversation. Happy weekend, everybody. Happy weekend, Gilbert. So until next week when we'll have our next masterclass. Thank you guys for joining. Take care.